Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today for the Evolve Electrical Updates and Q&A webinar. I am joined today by some of our Evolve product experts. We have Alex Siebert, our customer success specialist, Amber Zinke, director of pre-sales and customer success, Andrew Somerville, project manager, Adam Heon, project manager, and Jason Earl, product manager. And we are here to go over some new features and answer all of your guys' questions today. I am going to kick it over to Alex to start us off.
Awesome. Thanks, Marina. So I'm going to share my screen here real quick. So the thing that I am going to go through today is actually it's within Foresight. Um, I'm going to basically show you how to assign projects to project members and kind of how that workflow works. So that way you can take advantage of the design module. So I'm going to go through that. Marina, it's saying that I can't share screen. Perfect. So I'll pull this up. All right, you should be seeing my screen. So this is going to be the main page that admins are going to see when they log in. Also, just for reference, admins are going to be the ones who set up the project within Foresight. Company members can set up projects within Revit. However, that kind of makes for a messy projects folder within Foresight. So just to make sure everything's nice and clean and everyone's on the projects that they need to be, or if you're not going to utilize the design module, the ability to assign everyone to one project. So that way you don't really have a huge setup when it comes to Revit projects, but your Foresight project will be good. So I'm going to kind of go through this. So like I said, this is going to be the main page. You're going to want to come over here to the projects tab and then hit my projects. So this is where all your projects are going to show up. The cool thing is you can actually click on these and see who's actually assigned to these projects. So within this, you can actually see project members and see who's actually assigned to these. You can also see who the admins are too by going to project properties and going to admins. As you can see, there's no admins on this current project that I'm showing, but let me actually go into, I created a test project yesterday. So created this project. And this is the project properties as I already showed on a previous project. But what you're going to want to do is you actually go into your project members and invite users. So some companies have actually been adding just a bunch of admins because it takes you directly to that project properties list. So admins, if you want to have a bunch of admins, that's perfectly fine. However, if you want to make sure that your company members aren't able to go into the projects within Foresight and kind of mess around with things that you don't want them to, which is usually just within the project properties, you can definitely assign them as project members right here, just like you would a company member. As soon as you invite a user, they're actually going to get an email invite from the no reply at evolvemep.com. So as soon as they accept that project, they will be able to select that when creating a new project in Revit. Of course, this is just a one-time setup thing. So as soon as you select that project within Revit, you won't have to set that up again until you start a new project. But all of this stuff is basically setting you up to take advantage of the design module, which everyone should have access to. So admins and company members alike. Within the design module, you can actually, just a couple things off the top of my head that you can actually work with as soon as you link these is you can set up locations and work phases. You can do a catalog setup. You can do takeoffs and have your build of materials in there as well as work requests. So it's just a good thing to have connected so that way you can kind of keep an eye on projects, especially from kind of a top-down view. So if you're a BIM manager and you aren't necessarily in the trenches of day-to-day like coordination or anything along those lines, but you want to check in on a project, this would be a good way to do that. But yeah, overall, that's how you would assign a project member. If you guys do have any questions about it, please let me know. I can either help walk you through it or just kind of take you through any questions that you do have about it. Let's see here. So yeah, that's about it. I will actually kick it over to Amber to go into the actual Evolve software.
Perfect. All right, let me share my screen here. So today we're going to be kind of going over a few more so like frequently asked questions, support tickets, things like that. So just typical questions that we get about the software or little things to keep in mind about what would be helpful for any of those troubleshooting questions that you might have. So first I want to go over our project versus user settings. Being able to understand that is going to make a huge impact on your day-to-day life and making sure that you have that set up properly as well. Typically, you're going to see your different features indicated by the name. So let's open up our kind of run schedule here, and you're going to see this word project here. So that's going to allow you to kind of give you that first warning that this is a project setting. So when you're making modifications to anything that falls within this grid, that will be impacting your entire project itself. So if you are making few minor adjustments thinking it's only going to impact you and you currently, it's going to also impact everybody. So keep that in mind. And typically you're going to see the word project throughout our software any of the times that you click on the feature and your dialog box pops up here. So thinking about it, this is an example of user settings. So we have our user renumber settings. So typically you're going to see the word project or user. User, you can go crazy with being able to make it exactly what you would want it to be, but also keep in mind when they are user settings to make sure that you're communicating with your team on how you want to keep it standard. So especially with renumbering your elements, you're going to want to make sure that you are creating your different rules based on what your company standards are. So that's when you would definitely probably want to come down here and export, import in. So maybe it's one person creates your different standards for, let's say, renumbering, and then everybody else can just import it in. Obviously, you're going to probably time and time again need to create some of these yourself just based on those one-off situations. But again, just make sure that you come up with some kind of standard to be able to implement there. Again, even if they're user or project settings, you can definitely come in here and export, import in. So that's definitely helpful to be able to keep that in mind, especially if your coworkers have come up with some pretty cool element filters and things like that. You might want to tell them, hey, can you export those out for me? So that's the first one is going through the project and user settings. The next one would be your loading in families. So typically, how is kind of the best practice of loading in a whole bunch of families at once? So again, you can definitely come in here and load in what is needed into your template file. But if you are just starting off with Evolve or you're going to be utilizing Evolve mid-project, anything like that, and you want to load in a bunch of projects at once or files at once, I definitely recommend coming in here and listing some of your favorites. So typically, I would definitely make sure all of your hangers are listed as favorites, all of your bends. So anything that you know for sure you're going to want to have your families be loaded in. So I can star all of those. So mark them all as my favorite. You're going to see them all listed within your favorites tab within your family browser. And then all you have to do to load them all in at once is go down here to load favorites. This is a new 6.2 feature, so definitely keep that in mind. If you don't see this, it might mean that you need to upgrade to 6.2. Speaking of loading in families, that is probably a big thing I get a lot is when certain things happen or do not happen because the right family is not loaded into the project. So if you're getting any kind of errors or things are not working how you need to, make sure that the needed family is actually loaded in. Our Smart Bend multi-trim will need your two-piece bend families to be loaded in. So keep that in mind. Also looking at other families as well. Make sure your sleeves are loaded in, make sure the needed hangers are loaded in as well. So make sure that those families are loaded in. I will actually go over to a different project here and show you what might also happen depending on if you don't have the needed things loaded in. And I definitely recommend implementing a lot of this into your template file so then you don't have to necessarily worry about too much of it. So let's say I'm drawing conduit here and it won't let me draw in my bend. Or let's say I'm trying to multi-trim these and it won't let me. So maybe you get an error like this. So a lot of times if you're trying to, let's say, connect elements or things are acting a little funky, first thing I would do is definitely check what kind of conduit type is being used. Kind of give you a fair warning because it might mean that your conduit types are not loaded in. So if that's the case, go to Utilities, System Families, and then you're going to see we have a bunch of tabs up here. So definitely a different order than you probably have seen when it comes to drawing in content with Evolve 6.2. They're going to see it all within the system. It's right here. So you have your conduits. I'd make sure that all of these are expanded out and then load in your types. Your system families is also going to be where you're going to be able to find your cable tray, busway, MC cable, flex, and pathway. So that's going to be very similar when you're trying to utilize the cabling feature. So trying to auto route between two devices. Maybe you're not able to remotely select any of your MC cable. That because, again, it's not actually physically loaded into the project itself. So to load in Evolve families, that would be in the family browser. To load in some of the system families, that's going to be in the feature within utilities themselves. So to load them in, you just hit load types and it'll load in what you need. So I'm going to, the other thing to also look at if you're not able to kind of manipulate your conduit the way you want to. So again, this is just a kind of a generic conduit here, right here, but we can go into our edit type. So go into your edit type and look right here for your fittings themselves here. So that will indicate a lot of information for you when it comes to the bend itself. So now that I have some Evolve conduit loaded in, again, to draw in Evolve conduit itself, you can do it how you're used to, just in native Revit as well. But you could also go into your system families, choose what you need, and draw in your conduit itself. But again, you could also still use your keyboard shortcuts. So CN and draw in that. So now looking at this conduit here, if I go into my edit type, you're going to see some of that information for your fittings as well. So your bend information, your T, and then also your union. So when you splice your conduit, what's going to be popped there? It's going to be that coupling here. If you want to make any modifications to it, you can. That's where you would be able to. Also, you're going to see a lot of that information, again, within your Evolve tab, utilities, system families. If I expand that out, you're going to also see what family is associated with it as well within here. But to be able to make modifications to it, that would be within the edit type. All right, so that's a little bit about making sure everything's loaded in. Next would be being able to get an error when trying to load in a family. So let's try to load in some equipment here. So I'll go to my switchboard. I'll try to place in a 5 section. If you ever get this error right here, so cannot locate your type here. So typically this happens when, well, it can happen a lot of different ways. But if you purge out your model or things like that, this is typically meaning that the switchboard was already placed within the model and somehow this type was deleted out of the project. So if I go into my project browser, scroll down to my families, so the families that are actually loaded into the project itself, go to my electrical equipment, and then I'm going to find that switchboard. You're going to see the different types I have. I'm definitely missing a few. So how to resolve this? There's a few different ways to do it. One thing is you could just delete this out. But again, when I try to do it, it's saying, hey, you're going to be deleting out some of those families. I would typically double check how many families are actually loaded in here. You don't want to accidentally delete out a bunch of families that you've already placed and everything is ready to go in that area and you deleted out a whole bunch of your families that you need. You could definitely create maybe a schedule to locate those elements within your project just so you can see if it's even important to keep them or not. So you could definitely, one, delete it, or you could come in here and again, right click, rename this family. I'm gonna say bad. Again, you can have whatever naming convention you want. Typically, I don't like renaming a whole bunch of different families because again, why have unneeded families in there? But again, just one of a use case that you can do with this. So it's going to rename that for me. Let's go back into my family browser here and find that switchboard now. Paste that in there. So you can see I don't have any issues anymore. And let's go back to our project browser. You're gonna see that's also there. You can see this one right here. You can see the major difference on the types that are located within this family itself. So that's one thing to keep in mind. Either make sure that you're not accidentally deleting out types or purging out your model, because it can make some not so fun stuff there. All right, moving on from there. A lot of times, let's say you're trying to spool some of your elements themselves and you're trying to select everything that you need to. So define your spool, you define what you want. Very boring naming convention, but you're selecting and you're not actually able to select the elements or you're not able to actually include an element into your spool drawing. For the most part, our preset up rules will allow you to select, conduit, cable tray, all that fun stuff. But let's say you have an element that is not necessarily what you're thinking of on the electrical side, but you need to include that within your spool drawing for whatever reason. So to be able to include that, you go into your utilities, go into settings, go into your selection configuration. So selection configuration, this tool here will allow you to identify the elements that you're able to control within the feature itself. So looking at it with our defined spool, we can do our little 3 dots here. Again, I definitely always recommend getting comfortable with element filters throughout our software. But you can see these are all of our categories that you're able to define as a spool. So good amount of categories, but let's say I needed, for whatever reason, furniture. I'd be able to include that within here. So furniture. Again, if there, for whatever reason, you need to include a different category, you can definitely make modifications within there. Or let's say you don't want anybody within your team to create spools of certain elements. You could definitely uncheck these as well. But keep in mind if you're trying to play like a mean joke on a coworker and make them think that things are broken, anything that you deselect in here, since these are project configurations, it will impact the project file itself. So definitely keep that in mind when you're making modifications to that as well. We're going to see a good amount of different features within your project's selection configuration that you can impact and make modifications to. So looking at it, hanger placement, we have our conduits, our conduit fittings, and cable tray. Maybe you don't want anybody to ever place hangers on cable tray. You can turn that off for whatever reason. Or again, let's say you are not able to place hangers on a certain element, definitely come in here and make sure that your elements are checked here. So that is our selection configuration here. Next, another feature is, let's say you want to pull additional parameter information into some of your grids themselves. So looking at it, maybe for my conduit run schedule, let's zoom in here and select piece of conduit here. So looking at all the different parameters themselves, and looking at my conduit run schedule. So there's a good amount of different information that I can push and pull into the conduit itself. But maybe I am somebody who is exporting this out to Excel itself. So maybe I'm passing this off to somebody else who wants to see all this information itself. Maybe I want to add a little bit more information into our grid here. And this, again, will work with majority of the grids. Well, our conduit run schedule, and I'll show you some of the other ones. But to be able to include a parameter into a grid that you want to have access to, again, go into utilities, go to settings, and then you're going to go to parameter settings. So parameter settings is where you're able to identify the parameter that you want to include, and then you're able to specify the feature that you want to have that included in. So your prefab manager, your location manager, your conduit run schedule, or your cable schedule. So if I wanted to include, let's do another LBS. Maybe I want to do my LBS ID. So LBS, that is going to be for your locations. So your LBS ID is going to be when your elements are associated with the location itself. Let's bring that into our conduit run schedule for whatever reason. Let's do that and then press OK. So let's go back into the conduit run schedule itself. So right away, you're not going to see that being pulled within the grid itself. What you're going to have to do is right click and go to your column chooser right here. And then you're going to see that right here for you to pull into. This is also a great way to show you if you ever accidentally hide any of your columns. So if you hide any of your columns, to be able to get those back, right click, go into your column/band chooser, and that's going to be all of your hidden columns. So then you can easily bring those back in. I always like to double check with those as well when it comes to any major update within Evolve. If there was an enhancement to the feature itself, maybe an additional parameter was added or additional information was added to a grid itself, I would definitely make sure that you open up your column chooser and make sure there isn't anything new and cool to bring in as well. So you can definitely bring them all in here if I want to. There we go. So I definitely recommend kind of being able to get familiar with how the grid itself is set up, how you can filter, how you can sort, being able to pull all that kind of information up and sort it. Get very comfortable with it just because our grids throughout Evolve are going to have very similar features to it. Again, first thing I would look for is indicating if they're project settings or user settings. Definitely look through all of the different tabs themselves. And ooh, I just remembered one as well. One thing to also keep in mind when it comes to your conduit run schedule for your options here for your enable system colors, when you are providing colors to your systems themselves, make sure when you assign a color, you're also including solid fill here. That's one thing to definitely make sure that you have kind of selected there. That can definitely get you sometimes. Other things with the conduit run schedule, kind of different tips and tricks and things that to be aware of is being able to understand your links being auto-calculated. So if your conduit itself, by default, once you assign your run to one of your run IDs, your links will be auto-calculated for you. If you're realizing your links, again, aren't auto-calculating, things are acting a little funky, anything like that, I would first make sure you go to your utilities, settings, workstation settings. Within your workstation settings, you're going to see we have this enable conduit run schedule length calculations. If this is unchecked, your lengths will not automatically be calculating as you're drawing in your elements or making modifications to that run after it was assigned. So make sure that this is checked. If it is unchecked, it's no big deal. You still can get those lengths to be calculated. And to be able to do that, that would be our refresh conduit links. Refresh conduit links, you're going to have 3 different options here. You have push to selection, you have push to view, and then you have push to entire project. Push to entire project, I think it will give you a warning to say, hey, are you sure? Might take a few seconds to say the least. So typically I would definitely do push to selection or push to view. Push to selection, you could definitely come into and create an element filter to select any of your conduit that have a run ID assigned to them. So you could select all of them that already have them and then push your links to be auto-calculated based on that selection itself. So that's definitely one way that you could do it. I definitely recommend playing around with element filter to get pretty comfortable with kind of how you can select the elements and play around with it. With that being said, element filter, I keep on talking about it. It goes in hand in hand with a lot of our utility features and just features throughout. Element filter, you're going to see it within our sleeve settings. You're going to see it again in majority of our utilities themselves. So the one feature I could say get comfortable with is your element filter. It will help you extremely to be able to feel comfortable with how you select and find your elements themselves. With that being said, another feature that works hand in hand with our element filter, it'd be colorizer. So element filter, I could easily select elements that are missing certain information. So I could come in here and let me modify this and say it's blank. So I could find all of my elements that are blank. So select all my elements that are blank. So all of them are blank right now. Let's put some in here for the comments. Again, I'm doing the no thing of doing my control C, but I'm trying to show something. So let's put in some comment information here. All right, let's rerun that command itself. So you can see it's selecting all the elements that are missing that information. So element filter, you could easily find the elements that are missing information. With colorizer, you could indicate all the elements that are missing information. So looking at this rule here, again, it's looking at my lights, my light fixtures, and it's a very simple rule. It's looking for my comments parameter is blank, but this could be indicating any parameter that you need to add in information to. So with colorizer, Colorizer in my mind is almost kind of like reverse filter. So instead of having to go to every single view and apply a color to that view, you can set up your colorizer rules within there. So looking at this, let's create a new one. Come in here, your group and subgroup. These are going to be a huge help for organization. Again, I would definitely talk to your company and figure out the different standards that you want to put in place for maybe how you are grouping your different features, how you're identifying kind of the different subgroups. Colorizer can definitely be utilized as just a way to color your elements in general instead of utilizing filters or view templates in that situation. Or you could utilize Colorizer in like QC checks as well. My favorite thing is seeing when people create a kind of dedicated QC view itself, and then you can definitely run through that view and apply a whole bunch of Colorizer rules to see if any of your elements are missing information, exceeding lengths, if there's non-standard bends, so on and so forth. So I'm gonna hide this. I'm not gonna worry about subgroup, but I'm going to put a run order. I'll just put it as 1 right now. My rule, I'll say light QC. Description is going to be helpful for situations where you're wanting to let your coworkers know why you're applying this colorizer rule or what you're doing within this colorizer rule. So it's really helpful if you're going to be doing anything with work sharing. Again, keep in mind that these are project settings. So anything that you put within your colorizer, it will impact the entire project itself. And I definitely, especially with Colorizer for more of the feature focused elements, I would definitely put that into that view template itself. Well, not view template, the project template file. Or you could easily export and import in. All right, so go to that element filter, that basic one where we're looking for my light fixtures. So I'm going to redo this, but I could definitely actually pull it from existing. So if you have something that you've created within here that you want to then apply almost a color to that scenario, you could almost just pull that rule that you've already created into the colorizer. So that's one thing to definitely keep in mind is your element filter, the standalone feature itself will also allow you to utilize those rules within your utilities that run off of element filter. So I'm going to choose my category itself. So lighting fixtures. I'm going to add a condition, the parameter itself, super basic. Comments is blank. Press OK. My view filter. So I can say all views, or I can get view specific as well. So if I'm view specific, I would add a condition and specify that. So I'd say view name is equal to blah, blah, blah. I always like contains, but that's just a preference, personal preference there. But if you know the exact naming convention of the view, I would just say equal to. I'm not going to worry about that. I'm going to say all views for now. Press OK. And then I'm going to, what color do I want it? I'll be red because it's missing some stuff there for me. Clear colorizer, that is based on if those elements actually match, or the elements themselves are defined based on your element filter here, then it will clear the colors instead of apply a color. Execute on, I'm going to say on any update and enable. The enable right here is probably also one of the biggest things I get as well. Make sure when it comes to the different utility rules and just in general with Evolve, make sure that when you're creating these different rules, you're hitting enable for them. If they're not enabled, you can't do anything about it. I'll say there as well. Also, what's nice about these error messages right here it will let you know if you're not done. So it will not allow you to have missing information. You have to actually fill out all the needed fields here to not have that error message. So I'm going to hit apply. I'm going to select these and I'm going to refresh my view. So now you can see all of those lights themselves that are missing that information are also red. So you could definitely use element filter and colorizer hand in hand, especially for QC checks. So in this situation now I can see all of these are red. So anything that is red means bad, unless I said that I want it to be red for whatever reason. But now I could use my element filter rule here and then fill in what I need. So that is one way you can definitely kind of utilize them hand in hand. All right, the last thing that we're going to talk about is creating some odd shaped rooms for your locations. So for locations themselves, again, the use case for locations, there's a lot of them. You can break up your model by room, by area, by floor, however you want to do it. What allows you to do it then is all the elements that fall within that location will then be assigned to that location itself based on your assigned location. So right now, my location itself is a perfect little box. Also, if you don't ever see your locations, go into your visibility graphics, go to generic models, and that's how you can turn on or off your LBS. So if I want to turn them on, again, hit OK there, and there we go. So by default, it's going to be this perfect little square that you can easily stretch it out, align it to where it's needed, but not too many rooms are this perfect. So if you're wanting to make a custom odd shaped room location, to be able to do that, you're going to go to, well, there's multiple ways, but you can go to your architecture component. We're going to do model in place. I'm going to scroll down to generic models. Press OK. So the naming convention of this is the most important. So keep that in mind. So I'm going to do EV underscore LBS. So after that point, you can write in whatever makes sense. I'll just do room. But it needs this starting point right here, the EV LBS. Press OK. Make sure it is an extrusion. And then you can just keep on defining the crazy room. Hopefully none of your rooms ever look like this. Press finish. Finish. So now when I go into my properties here, you're going to see we have that information shown. So this is identified now as an LBS location. So with this as well, you're going to see a few things. The biggest thing to make sure that you have information applied to it would be making sure that you have a name associated with this. So the naming is, again, whatever your standards are, definitely communicate that with your coworkers of what you want to have your standard location be. Typically, it's probably going to be based on your room. So we'll do room 1, 2, 3, 4. But also if you're doing this zone by zone or by area, however you want to do it, I would definitely, again, apply that. Whatever you have here for your LBS name, that is going to be what the elements themselves are associated with. So definitely keep that in mind when it comes to the naming convention, because then the element itself that falls within that location will then be identified with it. So the biggest thing, again, to be able to play around with it would be making sure that your LBS name is listed. And then from there, you can put in like the type. So if you want to indicate this as electrical room, a dorm room, things like that, you can definitely specify that. Just another way of being able to group all of those different LBS types as well. You're gonna also see that within my locations as well here, my location manager. That will be listed here. One thing I definitely always point out, this is a new 6.2 feature. I love it. We do have that locate element too. So if you ever like, I have no idea where this element is within my project, you can definitely select it and locate it. Also, one other little tip and trick I like to say is anytime you're making modifications into your grid, if you're selecting or needing to change a lot of your different information here, and you're kind of coming here and selecting it and selecting it, selecting it all the way down, I definitely recommend utilizing the bulk update. The bulk update, you can select everything, specify your field itself and what you want to change it to. So bulk update is a huge help. So you're not going to be sitting there one by one making any modifications. All right. So that was everything I had prepared for you all today for the different frequently asked questions. I know we covered a good amount of different features within Evolve Electrical. If you have any questions, let me know. But if not, after digesting all this, if you have any additional questions, definitely reach out to us.
All right. I'm just going to go ahead and answer the one question we have here in the Q&A. Igor asks, can I see this video in Evolve YouTube? Yes, absolutely, Igor. So we will be uploading it to the YouTube channel once the webinar has been completed. So if you're not following us there, definitely make sure you are. There's all kinds of valuable feature demos. And then we will also be sending an email follow-up directly to everyone who's registered the webinar, and that will include a link right to the YouTube video. So keep an eye out for that. All right, fantastic. All right, Amber, looks like we had a question pop up here from Caesar. Does our system automatically update when there are new features and updates?
Great question. So, no. So, if you're wanting any new features that Evolve offers, typically, let me share my screen. Oh, I think I'll almost, yeah, thank you. Let me share my screen again. So, there's a few ways that you can find that information, but you're going to be wanting to go to the Evolve website itself. So, I have that shortcut right now. So I did add that into my shortcuts. You can add a whole bunch of stuff into your shortcuts. So if anything that you're frequently going to within Evolve, so any kind of information that you would want, I would definitely include that in a shortcut. So shortcut, downloads, but you're going to be wanting to go to the Evolve website. The other way to find it, I'll kind of open the starting point of the Evolve website. To be able to find it, you would go into your resources and downloads. So this is where you're going to be able to view any of the new and latest and the greatest upgraded features. So just choose the one that you need for the Revit itself. So if I'm going to be doing Revit 2022, click on this, and then you're able to download that for the new installer.
Thanks, Amber. We have another one from Pinky. Do you have any typical installation drawings that you can share with us for electrical?
Um, Great question. I have very basic ones. Very very basic drawing sets here, all sorts of fun ones. Um, but if it's ever something that you would more so want kind of examples of how to create different spool drawings and what kind of information would be helpful for per your specific job, definitely reach out to us and we can definitely look at what you're required for and what kind of modifications we can have for your title block itself.
Great. All right. David asks, the Evolve sample files on Foresight are good. How often do you update it?
Yes. So we typically update the sample files. Typically, anytime a new release comes, that's when we will be upgrading or updating some of those sample files. So in 6.2, we did have an update for it, a few more reports that you'll have access to, and all that fun stuff.
Fantastic. And another one here. Do you have any box-to-box auto conduit routing other than the Type 2 auto route family?
So for in-wall, we only have two options for in-wall for the auto routing. So that would be going in here. That would be the type 1 and the type 2. So those are the ones we have right now. But keep in mind, our families are unlocked. So if you want to make modifications to our families, you can definitely kind of play around with those. Yes, sorry, I read that question too. Will Evolve be making more off-the-shelf reports to use? Yes. I'm pretty sure in 6.2 we did include a few more reports that you'll have access to. And again, we have a lot of amazing reports being created. So if there's ever a question about reports, definitely let us know.
Great. Any last questions? Now is the time to get them in. All right. Well, thank you so much, everybody. Make sure you are following us on social media to stay up to date with all the latest releases and register for next month's webinar as well. Same time, same place, last Thursday of every month at 2 p.m. ET. Thanks so much for coming, and we'll see you next time.